Hello and welcome to this discussion on the Chinese city system at the Madras Complexity Collective. The story of global urbanization over the last 50 years has primarily been the story of China. In this conversation, we will have Professor Gang Zhu from Wuhan University talk to us about what has happened in China, the transformation in China over the last half century. He will help us lay the context of the reforms process adopted by China in 1979 and how this led to the various transformational outcomes in terms of economic growth and development in China, but also some of the other consequences, such as regional and spatial disparities that resulted as a consequence of the same processes. Right? We will also speak about issues of migration, the urban hierarchy that is evident in the Chinese city system. We will speak about urban scaling in the Chinese city system. And we will conclude with a discussion on issues of urban land and density in China and what this tells us about the evolution of the Chinese city system. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. All right. So first of all, Gang, thank you so much, for your time. Welcome to this conversation, this discussion on the Chinese city system with the Madras Complexity Collective. You've done a lot of work over many years exploring, the urban system in China. And, for those of us who are from outside, I think, China is one of the largest countries in the world. It's a fascinating country, long history. It's a civilization that's thousands of years old, and understanding the urban system or throwing some light on that, I think, will be interesting for many people to hear about. So maybe you can start us off with talking a little bit about the broad story of what has urbanization in China and over the last 100 years looked like. What are the forces that have driven it? If you can give us a sense of some of those themes, that'll help us get started.
Okay, thank you, Anand. It's my great honor to have this conversation to talk something about urbanization, urban system, and urban scaling in China. You know that the Chinese urbanization process was started at 1978. Yeah, 1978 was a very special year in China. Yeah, because in this year we have began the reform and open policy. Yeah, so we know that urbanization is accompanied by industrialization, or in another word, industrialization and urbanization, they are goes together. So before the reform and open policy, China was an agricultural country. Yeah, agricultural country. Our main economic, the main economic was agriculture, but after the reform and open policy in 1978, China has entered the era of industrialization. In the year 1978, the urbanization level in China is below 20%, below 20%. From 1978 to this year, we can see that there are only 40 years. Another important number is the urbanization level in the past year in China is 67%. Right. Yeah. In 2024, 67% of people, Chinese people, living in cities. So from the reform and open policy, China spent only 40 years to experience the rapid increase of urbanization level from less than 20% to 67%. Yeah. So in China, we always say that we only spent 40 years to go the way that the Western country has spent 200 years to finish the urbanization process. So in China, we say that this is a great achievement because we only spent 40 years to promote the low-level urbanization level to a higher urbanization level. So this is the first point I want to talk about the process, the temporal variation of urbanization level in China. Another point is that we have achieved great achievements, but there are also many problems in the urbanization in China. Yeah, one of the, in terms of the, specifically in the urbanization level, one of the problem is the spatial disparities.
Yeah.
Spatial disparities. Yeah, we know that in China, the whole country, 2/3 people lived in cities. Yeah, this is a large number, right? But you know that not all provinces experienced so high urbanization level. For example, in West and in North China, the urbanization level is relatively low. Yeah, particularly in some West North province like Xinjiang and Tibet, the urbanization level is below 50%. Yeah, below 50%. Even in the most developed province, yeah, you know that Guangdong province in southern China is a very developed province in China. Yeah, there are two mega cities in this province. One is Guangzhou. Yeah, the other is Shenzhen. Yeah, Guangzhou and Shenzhen are mega cities. More than 10 million people live in these two cities. Yeah, the urbanization level in Guangdong province is over 75%. But within the Guangdong province, there are some small prefecture level cities. They experienced a low level urbanization level. Yeah, I think it's below 50%.
So Gan, just actually want to, stop there for a moment because this is actually very interesting because 1978, like you said, was a big sort of turning point for China, right? It's almost like Chinese history from 1948 can be split into two eras, 1948 to 1978 and then 1978 onwards, right? I was actually, one of the things I was curious about, and I was reading a little bit about, not China, I was reading about the Soviet Union, right? And what the Soviet Union was trying to do back in the days of communism was that there were two things that were driving them, right? One was to ensure that regional equalization happens. And this is a problem that you just talked about, right? That regions need to sort of grow and develop equally. This is a difficult thing, but this is something that they were trying to do. And what that meant was that they tightly controlled migration. So a Soviet citizen couldn't just go to a city and start a life there. Migration was heavily, controlled. So they did that to ensure some sort of, regional equity. And one of the consequences of that was that, in 1990, around the time the Soviet Union broke down, you had Moscow, which was a very large city of about 10 million people. You had St. Petersburg, which is half that size. And then you have like about 20 cities, right, which are between 1 and 2 million. So it was a very strange sort of distribution of cities that you got because of these regional equalization processes that they tried. So I was just curious, in China, you spoke about two, mega cities just in the one province. If you look at the whole Chinese city system, big cities, small cities, can you talk a little bit about the role of migration before and after 1978 and how that has resulted in the distribution of Chinese city sizes?
Okay. Thanks, Anand. In terms of the Soviet Union, yeah, I'm not familiar with the story in their country. So I will focus on the story in China. Okay. So you mean that you say that the driving force of urbanization, right? And another point we are talking about is migration within the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as I just said before, I think urbanization and industrialization, they are interconnected. So the achievements of Chinese urbanization is also accompanied by industrialization. You can see that the economy of China has increased rapid growth during the past 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, just because the increase of economy, we can invest to build our cities so we can achieve the great achievements in urbanization. Okay. So yeah, in my opinion, I think the most important driving force of urbanization is economy growth. Yeah, economy growth. Okay, another point we will talk about is migration. Yeah, particularly is how to say that inter-country migration, right? Inter-country, yeah. This is a key point as you mentioned. Before the reform and open policy, yeah, people living in rural areas cannot enter the city freely to find jobs. Yeah, but after the reform and open policy, yeah, particularly I think it's about in 1980s. Yeah, in 1980s, people living in rural areas went to cities to find jobs, and they leave from their farmland to the built-up areas to find jobs. So most people, you may be heard that in China we have the hukou system.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether you heard that.
Yes.
Yeah. People living in rural areas, the hukou system divided these people are rural population, but they live in cities all the year. Actually, they are urban population, right?
Right.
So what I mean is that after the reform and open policy, rural population can find jobs in cities freely. So this is the most driving force of China urbanization. Yeah, so this is a Chinese story. Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's enough.
No. I think it's very interesting because China is one of those countries that, has seen very, very different kinds of systems, over time. You had, like we spoke about, two sort of very, very different eras. And, Chinese urbanization, as you spoke about, urbanization is very tightly linked to processes of industrialization and development, right? And one of the things I would be keen to understand before we move on to the next topic is how much of Chinese growth and development is happening in the biggest cities, right? All these mega cities, 10 million plus. And, and how much of that is really spreading, how much of that growth is happening in, smaller cities? What is your sense of sort of the regional, or not even regional, sort of, it's sort of the urban hierarchy. If you look at the large cities and the small cities, what do you see in terms of the growth story?
Okay. Yeah, this is a very interesting point. That I missed just now. Yeah, when we talk about the rural population move to cities, in the 1980s or in 1990s, people usually move to coastal cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hangzhou. Yeah, these coastal cities, right? To find good jobs. But after the 2010, yeah, in the past 10 years, yeah, people prefer to move to their provincial capital cities.
Okay.
Provincial capital cities, yeah, because they can live more clear to their hometown. Yeah. So in China, we call this transformation or this shift of urbanization is mega urbanization. Mega urbanization. Yeah, which means that most people move from small city to larger cities and also to like those mega cities. Yeah, for me, I lived in the central China. Yeah, my province is Hubei province, and the provincial capital city of Hubei province is my city, Wuhan.
Right.
Yeah, 30 years ago, Hubei rural population were more preferred to go to Guangzhou, Shenzhen, but in these years, rural people in Hubei province they prefer to move to Wuhan city. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yes. So
Actually,
this
that's
is
really interesting because in India, I think we still find that a lot of the urbanization that's happening is directed towards, the mega cities. So the Delhis and the Bombays and the Bangalore's and, Hyderabad, all these cities get, disproportionate amount of migration. We have still not seen this transition to, other more medium-sized cities. So I think it's interesting that's already, happening in China. Just to then, to move forward from the context that you've set for us, shall we talk about, your own work on understanding the Chinese urban system using the framework of scaling,
yeah.
So as you know, we've had a couple of conversations already around scaling and, what that means. Can you quickly talk about talk a little bit about, what would you expecting in terms of scaling results for Chinese cities? What did you observe? Were there any discrepancies that were interesting?
Yeah. I think urban scanning is a very useful tool to uncover how urban how it's a useful tool to uncover the how urbanization evolve over time.
Right.
So when I do my research, I'm not I pay more attention on how the scanning exponent varied over time. Yeah. We also know that some urban scanning, there were some urban scanning analysis in other countries like Brazil and India. They reported that some indicators violate
Yeah.
the theoretical expectations. For example, in Brazil, the infrastructure is a superlinear scale with the population size because they found that these urban infrastructure are government-led investment. So large cities have
More. Yeah.
much more economy to invest infrastructure, so they are superlinear, right? For
Right.
your study, you find sublinear scaling of crimes in India. Yeah, I know you are very familiar with your story. But in China, we did not find those urban indicators that violate the theoretical expectations. So we pay more attention on how the scaling exponent varied over time. Yeah, I think the variation of the scaling exponent reveal how the urban system evolved over time. Yeah, but I will. Maybe I will combine with my papers to tell the details. Maybe the details is not important in this conversation, right?
But please go ahead and, I think it's interesting to hear about what you're finding,
Yeah.
especially because you're talking about a temporal evolution. I think it'll be nice to hear about what it is that you're finding.
Yeah. In the urban scanning in China, yeah, we have found that the scanning exponent of a Chinese economy are a little bit higher than 1.15.
Right.
Yeah, which means that the economy development in large cities are much better than the theoretical expectations. Yeah, most economies may large economy concentrated in large Chinese cities.
Right.
Yeah. But I think this is a small case. I want to talk about is the scale adjusted metropolitan indicator. Yeah, SAMI.
Sure.
You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is a new tool to compare the urban performance across the cities.
Right.
Yeah, for example, we use the SAMI to evaluate the urban performance in economy across the Chinese cities. We find
Okay.
that most coastal cities experienced the positive SAMIs. The most inland cities experience the negative SAMIs in economy. Yeah, which means that compared to the cities with the same size, coastal cities, they experience the higher economy performance. Yeah, so yeah, you know that the coastal cities have better conditions for economy development. For example, most of the people move to coastal cities, and they maybe have a much better economy and political policies to attract investment. Yeah.
Right. Actually, just to also clarify, I think when you talk about SAMI, which is scale adjusted metropolitan indicators, I think what we are saying here is that this is sort of a residual term. What it tells you about is the performance of individual cities that is above and beyond what you expect from the scaling exponent.
Yes, right.
And so what you're saying is that in China, you see systematically that coastal cities have high SAMIs, whereas cities that are inland have negative SAMIs, which indicates that the performance or the idiosyncratic performance of these cities is sort of quite different in terms of how they relate to one another. Actually, can you talk a little bit more about why do you think that is? Why is it that coastal cities in China perform much better than, because that seems to be a systematic relationship. It's not like just some set of cities performs better versus some set of cities that don't. It's very clearly, cities that are on the coast performing better and cities that are inland performing, worse. Why do you think that is based on your work?
Yeah, in China, it's a basic condition that the coastal cities are much better than inland cities. Yeah, because the coastal cities, they have, for example, they have exports,
Right.
such as sea exports. Yeah, so they have a close connection with the international economy.
Right. Trade networks, yeah.
Yeah. So another maybe another reason is economy concentration, because coastal cities development first. They have different companies. Yeah, they have advanced technologies. So they have the advantages in economy development. So they promise their advantages in economy development. So we can call this is the dependence, past dependence of economy development. Past dependent.
Exactly. So history plays an
Yeah.
important role here, right? For how individual cities perform over time.
Yeah, right.
And so you mentioned this already when you said that when you looked at the scaling exponent for economic growth in China, you found that it was actually it was higher than theoretical expectation of 1.15, right? So which means that your larger cities are actually overperforming in some sense.
Yes, right.
I just wanted you to sort of put that, maybe could you offer some comparison of that to say maybe other developed countries, say like the US or parts of Europe? How does the scaling exponent compare with those countries?
Yeah. And another point I want to say that there are competition among different provinces in China. Yeah, for example, the province I live is Hubei. There are another province, Hunan, Guangdong. Those provinces have competition to get the investment from the central government. So the provincial government will invest the resource to the largest city within their province, so they can have the leading rural to acquire investment or resource from the central government. So but in some provinces, I'm not sure whether you are familiar. In some provinces like Jiangsu province, yeah, there are some cities like Nanjing and Suzhou and many other cities in this province. They are comparable.
Okay.
These cities are comparable, but in my province, Hubei province, we have only the one mega city, which is Wuhan. Yeah, which is
Right.
Wuhan. Yeah, so Hubei government will invest the most resource in Wuhan, so that
Right.
Wuhan is a mega city. Wuhan can gauge resource or investment from the central government in the competition with other provincial capital cities.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And again, something that you touched upon a little bit, which is when you spoke about this SAMI comparison, and you found this difference between coasts and inland. In your work on scaling, not just economic, but all indicators that you studied, right? Do you find other interesting regional signatures that scaling throws up, and what that is telling you about different regions in China, about what is the story there?
Yeah. You know that the Chinese urban system, we can see the Chinese cities as one urban system, but we can also divide the China into different regions, so we can some suburban systems, right? So
Right.
we can compare different regions. So to compare the suburban system, what's their performance within
Right.
these suburban systems? Generally, those suburban systems, they share the similar scaling pattern across different parts, but in some parts they have some variations. For example, we have analyzed the household
Infrastructures.
what household how does like electricity consumption.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, household electricity consumption. Yeah, we think that electricity consumption, specifically household, yeah, which means family, right?
Right.
Household electricity consumption is linear scale with population size.
Right.
Yeah. But in some suburban systems, which is a sublinear or superlinear scale with the population size, which is different from each other.
Right. So I wanted to pick up on a couple of things that other aspects of your work. I think you've done quite a bit of work on urban land and density, urban land efficiencies. Actually, that is very interesting because urban land, we know that from theory, it will scale sublinearly with population because of increasing efficiency. Density of living goes up, so the amount of land required reduces per capita as population increases. But you have actually found, and I thought this was interesting, is that different kinds of land scale differently, right?
Yes.
Depending on kinds of land use. So I just, can you talk a little bit about that? Like what kinds of land uses did you find scaling differently, and why that might be in China?
Yeah. This is an interesting topic. Yeah, we know that urban land can be divided into different categories. For example, the commercial urban land, residential urban land, and other urban land are used for public facilities. Yeah.
Right.
In one of our study, we have analyzed how different categories of urban land scale with city size. Yeah, in theory, urban land are sublinear scale with city size, which is
Right.
all know that. But we found industrial land in China are superlinearly scale with city size across
Right.
across the urban system in China. Yeah, so we think that the reason is related to the investment. Yeah, investment. Yeah, large cities in China have more investment, more
Right.
resource. So the government will supply more industrial land in
Correct.
large cities. So large cities experienced more, large cities have more industrial land at the per capita level.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that's very, because I would imagine that if this analysis was done for other countries, you might find something similar that if you split land use into residential and industrial, I mean, people live in sort of dense, apartment blocks and all of that. So land use is, reduced, but bigger cities are often magnets for investments. And, you have the big industries set up around the peripheries of big cities. So yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting. And it might well be that that result that you're finding, that industrial land scale superlinearly might hold across many different parts of the world. I don't know. Have you tried to do that for other countries or other contexts?
Yeah, not yet. Yeah,
Okay.
I think yeah, I have tried to find different categories of urban land from other countries, but I failed. I did not find this data on different categories of urban land in other countries.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Um,
this question maybe can be solved by remote sensing. Yeah, you know that
yeah.
recently remote sensing scientists have interpret different
Right.
categories of urban land, not only the built-up areas. They are doing in depth.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that might help, answer that question. You're right. Um, Actually, so related to this, right? This whole point of, when we say that we expect overall urban land to scale sublinearly, it's because urban density of living increases as we live in cities. You have done some work in China where you look at Chinese cities, I think post 2000, so over the last 20, 25 years. Um, and you find that there is a decline in urban densities in China, right, over this time. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about what does that mean? Like, why is that a secular decline that we see across the entire urban system? Are there certain kinds of cities where you see this? And why do you think that's happening?
Yeah. In, in my research, we found that the urban population density declined over time in Chinese cities. Actually, this is not only in Chinese cities, but also in other in global cities. Yeah. So first the thing I want to specify is that how we calculate urban density. Yeah, the
Okay.
urban population density is um the urban population divided by built-up area.
Okay.
Yeah, urban population divided by built-up area. Yeah, so when the urban population increases, the built-up area of a city also increase.
Correct.
So whether the urban density increase or decline, it determines it relies on which increase faster. If a
Right.
population increase faster than built-up area, the density will increase. If a built-up area expand faster than population growth, the density will decline.
Right.
Yeah. So we have the first study is conducted in China. We analyzed the urban density variation in Chinese cities. We found that the density declined over time. Yeah, another study, we collected global cities. Yeah, we have global evidence to show that global city also experienced the decline in density. Yeah, the
Right.
decline in density means that the land use efficiency is declining. Yeah. So this is another point why population increase fast. Why urban land expands faster than population grows.
Right.
Yeah, urban land expands faster than population grows. Yeah, this has been globally evidenced. Yeah.
Right.
So why? Yeah, in my opinion, we can analyze this phenomena through the driving force of urban expansion. Driving force of urban expansion. Yeah, which factors drive urban land? We know that the population increase will drive urban land, but there are also other factors such as economy increase.
Right.
Yeah, economy increase, economy growth will drive urban land expand because we get richer. We want to live in large house,
Correct.
so we will the urban will the economy growth will drive urban land expansion. So besides the population growth and the economy growth, there are other factors. The third most important factor is the decrease of transportation cost. Decrease of transportation cost.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. We have motor cars. We can drive faster, so we can live far away from our jobs. So this will drive urban land expansion.
And public transportation, right?
Yeah, urban land expansion, right? Apart from population growth, economy growth, the decline of transportation cost, there are also other factors that will drive urban land expansion. Yeah, for example, the decline of a household size.
Right.
Household size. Yeah.
Correct.
Before in the past, one family owned a house, but now the family size are declining. Yeah, the young people also want to buy their own house, so which also will drive urban land expansion. You know that in some European cities, the population are declining. The population are not increasing during the past, but the urban land also expands over time.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. So in my opinion, I think urban land expansion, urban land faster than population growth is a world evidence.
Right.
Yeah. So urban land expansion faster than population growth will result in the decline in urban population density. Yeah, which means the urban land use efficiency is declining.
Right. Right. So, that's actually super interesting that you say that, because I'm just wondering. So you've heard of the Kuznets curve, right, of inequality, which basically says that, as a society, as a society is in early stages of development, inequality increases, and then it sort of goes down. I wonder if, urban density follows something similar. Is that when a city is sort of in the early stages of development, and that densities might actually go up, but as the cities get richer, people's choices, like you said, to have more land, to have smaller families, to have better access to transportation, all of that drives perhaps a decline in densities. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but that's actually a very interesting finding.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm also thinking about this issue. How urban land density decline? Yeah, if there is no stage of increase, how will it decline? So it must be there is a stage or process of increase and then it decline, right?
Yeah.
Right now, recently I also analyzed this issue from the space.
Yeah.
You can see the two circles. The one circle is the central urban area, another circle is suburban area. If you look at the central urban area, maybe you will find that the urban density in central area did not decline very clearly.
Yeah.
But the suburban area, the density in suburban areas will it experienced the vast decline. Yeah, so
Right.
the
Yeah.
reason is a decline in suburban areas. Yeah, the newly developed urban areas. Yeah, newly developed urban areas, the density in these areas is very lower.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, from my observation, I think that some of the Chinese cities, the central urban areas like European cities, but
Right.
the newly developed areas is like American cities.
Hmm.
Yeah, in European cities, you will find that there are small blocks, small streets. Yeah, right. Small
Yep.
streets, which corresponds to a higher urban density. But the newly developed urban areas, they looks like American style, American cities, which means
Right.
we have broad roads, and broad gaps between buildings.
Right.
Broad gaps between buildings, so the density in the newly built urban areas is particularly lower than the central urban areas. So this is my observation and my thoughts. Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's something perhaps, we can even talk a little bit more about. And, it's because there might be a lot of interesting things going on there that can be worked on. So there was one final topic that I wanted to touch upon, which is again, based on your work, which is about air pollution in China. Now, one of the things that you hear is that 20 years back, Chinese cities were amongst the most polluted in the world, if you consider particulate matter or NO2 or any of these pollutants. But that China has had tremendous success over the last decade or two in
Yeah.
actually cleaning up, the air. And you've done some work on particulate matter patterns in cities over time and across the urban landscape, right? The core, the suburban, the periphery. So if you could talk a little bit about what is it that you found about particulate matter pollution in Chinese cities and how China has managed to control this in its urban areas.
Yes, the air pollution is another topic I have analyzed, but it was about maybe 10 years ago. I have analyzed the air pollution issues in China. Yeah, 10 years ago, air pollution was a very serious environmental problem in China. Yeah, 10 years ago in 2015, the air pollution in Chinese cities are very severe. Was very severe, but nowadays air pollution in Chinese cities are not so seriously. Are not so
Right.
serious. Yeah, we have more blue skies. Yeah, so the Chinese government will regulate a new air quality standard.
Right.
Yeah, 10 years ago, for example, the PM 2.5, the national standard is 33 uh, cubic meters,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, 33. But now the new standard will goes down to 15.
Okay.
Yeah, 15. Yeah, 15 is the standard recommended by the WHO, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, air pollution. This issue in Chinese cities, I think is much. The air quality is much better in Chinese cities compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think it's been a tremendous success as well. And, um, our cities, for instance, in India are currently at the stage where it's, where the levels of both particulate matter and NO2 are, quite high, especially in some parts of the country. And there are now efforts on to say, how do we get this under control? So China's story is actually very interesting for us from that context. So,
Yeah.
just before we let you go, one last sort of broad question to you is given all the work that you've done on understanding Chinese cities, the Chinese city system, you know, when you think about how urban policy is formulated, right? Whether it's by, let's say, whether it's the province of Hubei thinking about, urban policy for the province, or whether it's the central government thinking about urban policy for China. Given your sort of work with both scaling, remote sensing, all the various tools and techniques that you use, what do you think are some of the key policy or key ideas or recommendations you would have for how to think about, cities and, their growth and development.
Yeah, in my opinion, the most important issue of urban development in China is we should how to say that? We should minimize the gap between urban areas and rural areas.
Right.
You know that in China we have a famous word say that Chinese cities are like European cities, but Chinese rural areas are like Africa rural areas. So the gap between rural and urban areas in China is also very large. Yeah. So I think the most important we should minimize the gap between rural and urban areas. Yeah, most of the Chinese developed cities are very developed. There is a small gap between Chinese megacities and American megacities or European megacities.
Right.
Yeah, but when we focus on rural areas, there is a large gap between Chinese rural areas and the developed countries. So I think this is the most important thing the Chinese government will do. Actually, Chinese government is doing this issue. We have taken some public policies to minimize the gap between rural and urban areas.
So that you think is the most important, pressing concern for China, right? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, thank you so much, Gang, for your time and talking us through, the Chinese story as well as your work. We really appreciate, having you over, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. It's my great honor to have this conversation with you to tell something about China's story, specifically about the Chinese urbanization. Yeah, this is my personal research. Maybe not this just represent my own opinion, right? I think this is not the whole story of Chinese urbanization.
Of
Yeah,
course.
maybe other experts have different opinions about these issues.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you, Kuma. Yeah.